This is a story about fair play. Does China play by the same rules as everybody else? For over 40 years, the Chinese issued debt, the Republic of China, bonds bought by American citizens. Those bonds were paid for. The Chinese paid interest on them up to about 1938, and because of the Civil War, they had to stop. However, the new government in China, the People's Republic of China, has decided they don't owe the money to the American people or any other bondholder except for one group. In 1986, they agreed with Margaret Thatcher when they got Hong Kong back to pay British citizens that had these bonds the interest and the principal they owed them at a certain percent on the dollar. What we're asking right now is fair play for the American people and the people that hold these bonds. That just means that China pays the debt that they owe.
So they're not just in default, they're in selective default, which in international law and in financial practice is even worse. You pay some of the creditors, you don't pay other creditors. The American people are not inferior in any way with reference to their rights to the people of England.
Well, I think the American people will be outraged by this fact because they know that we're in this huge financial crisis in the United States. We're talking about raising our debt limit. We're paying people who own U.S. Treasury bonds, again, 100 cents on the dollar plus interest. And then they hear that there are Americans or the United States government owns these same Chinese bonds and we're not getting repaid. They will think that's unfair. And the average American will think that the American people and the American government is being cheated.
There are approximately 600 variations of defaulted sovereigns from China, whether that was the imperialist China, whether that was the Republic of China, as well as defaulted ones actually from the People's Republic of China. They all carry different values, different denominations. All were used to create development infrastructure for their country and the growth that we see today. They all say government of China on every one of these bonds.
Now, people say these are old bonds. That's true. Russia in 2002 paid back money borrowed during the time of the Tsar. Britain just recently paid $100 million back that they borrowed in World War II. That is over 100 years ago for the Tsar and about 60, 70 years ago, 60 years ago with respect to the Great Britain.
The Germans are still paying on the debt of the Weimar Republic from World War I. And so it's not like nations don't engage in practices whereby long-term debt is established and repayments are made. In the case of this Chinese debt, it is a perfectly reasonable thing for both the Chinese to pay and for the American government to demand that they repay.
It's in China's interest to solve this issue because it's been festering for a long time and it's not going to go away. And we know that they've had some concerns about trying to resolve issues on the continent in Europe, and we're working with those parties, so we're informed on those things. So there's a sensitivity to it. They're also aware that they haven't been formally asked by the government, U.S. government representatives to get this solved. That is a priority item.
The main reason that's given by most people, including most politicians and government officials, is because due to our huge balance of trade deficit with China, the Chinese own a great deal of our treasury paper, a huge amount of our treasury paper. This is seen as giving them an element of strength.
And it's not that the Chinese government itself has bought so much debt that they can tell us what to do. That can never be the case. And by the way, they probably own 8% of our debt, which is not that much to begin with.
China's buying our bonds as if, well, does that mean we let China get away with murder? What is it that we won't ask the Chinese do because they buy our bonds? A lot of people buy our bonds. So every administration has found an excuse not to talk about the substance of the issue. They've never denied that China owes us the money. They basically said, not today. And as I said previously, today has come. And now it is time to deal with it. And guess what? You have the American Bondholders Foundation that represents tens of thousands of bondholders, all of whom can be dealt with one decision.
The continuity of obligations of sovereign governments is a given. We have international financing of sovereign debts right now as a big issue around the world. It would really be bad if the idea of the continuity of obligations wasn't inherent.
We can imagine what kind of rules-based international financial system we would have if countries felt that they could, in effect, walk away from the debts every time a government changed. This is nonsense at the face of it, and China is flouting international rules in this connection.
It's very important to realize that the Chinese have a great interest in keeping us happy and making sure that the American economy and the American people thrive. They have a lot to lose if this American people either doesn't thrive or gets very angry at the Chinese and decides that we have been mistreated, treated badly.
If they're angry about what we are doing, they can say, okay, we're not going to buy any more of your treasury paper. And we can say, okay, then we won't buy any more of your products. I mean, it's as simple as that. They're not going to do that, because if we stop buying their products, the Chinese economy would collapse overnight.
American businesses still want to do business in China. The environment, the climate depends upon our believing and having some basis to believe that people will keep their promises in China.
This kind of issue is a barrier to unfettered access to the U.S. and other global capital markets over time. I don't believe that you can sweep a sovereign default of this magnitude under the carpet.
If China would repay this debt, it would send a signal that they are in fact interested in playing by international rules of economic behavior. That should be a clear signal to American businesses that China is a place to invest. If they don't repay this, that should also send a signal to American businesses that in fact China is a place that if you do invest there, your investment could be lost.
It's a nonpartisan issue. These bondholders are Republicans, they're Democrats, they're independents. They are middle-class, average American people that invested money in good faith to support our then ally in the war, and they're entitled to recompense of this issue.
Support the efforts of the American Bondholders Foundation, and you can bring down the deficit by significant numbers, and do justice, and do the right thing, and fulfill and meet a promise that was made to the American people.